right-hand side for Vieira, who'll play it through to Gabriel Jesus, who's in here for Arsenal. Gabriel Jesus to finish it off. Oh, what a way to do it! Gabriel Jesus seals the points for Arsenal. He's back, and he's back with a bang.
Into the penalty area it goes. Gabriel's header, and it's into the back of the net. Arsenal take an early lead through Gabriel.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the daily Arsenal podcast with me, Harry Symeou.
Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast, part of course, the 90-Min Football family. With me, your host, Harry Symeou. I'm still in the habit of saying that. We are, of course, still on great terms with 90 Min, and we're still going to do plenty of work together, of course. But this is the Chronicles of a Gooner, the independent Arsenal podcast now. I've got to say that too. It's just habit. It just comes out. I hope you're all good. I hope everybody is well. It's 5 p.m. on Tuesday, and we're about 3 hours out from that huge game at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. But guess what? We're not going to talk about that on this edition of the show. A lot of you will be listening to this after that game has taken place. And we all know what the result is going to be. We all know that Manchester City are going to turn up to a Tottenham Hotspur Stadium that isn't even full, that's full of casual supporters because those that tend to go every week have put their tickets on the exchange and aren't really that interested. We know that the atmosphere is going to be weird because the Tottenham fans, maybe they want to see their team play in the Champions League, and maybe they believe that the Ange Postecoglou project could be accelerated if, they get that Champions League money in. But we all know that City are going to win 3-0. So I just don't see the point in wasting time on a podcast that most of you are going to listen to or watch back after the game. There's just not much point getting into it. So we'll forget that. That's all I'll say on it. That's it. Done. No more talk about Tottenham against Manchester City. What we are going to talk about on today's show is we're going to discuss Pep Guardiola's comments. He's been saying that it isn't, well, he hasn't been saying directly, but he's been saying, look, if it was about money, then United and Chelsea and Arsenal would be all competing, etc., sort of refuting claims that his success is built upon the fact that Manchester City have invested mega money over the last however long. So we'll get into those comments, and I want to talk about why, in my opinion, there is some validity to what Pep's saying with regards to some of the other clubs, but I actually think he's missed a major point. And actually, I don't see him as a silly person. I don't see him as someone that isn't smart enough to have figured it out. It feels like Pep Guardiola is playing mind games at the real business end of the season. We're also going to talk about the supercomputer. You know, that thing you keep hearing about that keeps predicting stuff? We're going to discuss how the supercomputer, nearly messed up my words, views our chances of winning the Premier League title. We're also going to answer some of your Patreon questions that you've been sending in, and we'll take a couple as well from the live chat. So loads and loads to get into. You are listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Do not go anywhere. Okay, let's say a few hellos. Let's see what you guys are saying in the chat. Deflected Mind says, the day those 115 charges catch up, though, that's the day I will sleep in peace. This fraud needs to be stripped of his titles, referring to Pep Guardiola. Look how happily he's taking money from the back door and spending hundreds of millions. Wow. Afsar says, just wondering if any of the Manchester City kitchen chefs are Gooners. I doubt it. Big hello to Damien Kelly as well. We got Gooner 73. We've got Alex. We've got Luke, who says there's 115 reasons why City win the league every year. Times with JR says, we love you, Tottenham. We do. No, I wouldn't go that far. I'm not singing anything Tottenham or going that far with it, basically. Granddaddy Gooner says, good afternoon, Harry. Hope you're well, mate. Thank you for joining me. Trevor is with us. We've got Robert, who says, anyone see the Southern Lights last night? I know a lot of people this morning were sort of going on social media about members of the Ashburton Army that had gone apparently to the Waltham Abbey Marriott and let off a load of fireworks in an attempt to try and keep the Manchester City players, awake all night. Guys, they weren't even staying there. They weren't even staying there. They weren't there. They didn't travel down to London until this morning. So I do feel sorry for the people that were actually there and the people who actually had their sleep sort of broken up as a result of it. But you know what? Fair play to the guys that went and done it, because if they thought that they were there, if they thought that they were helping the team in some tiny little way. I mean, I know, in my job, I shouldn't really condone stuff like that, but I kind of like it. I've got to be honest. I was going to say I'll take my Arsenal hat off, but I'm literally physically wearing an Arsenal hat right now, so there's no need for that. Anyway, we've got Adair. Hope you are good. Welcome, mate. Good to see you. Avatar Legend says, bricking it for tonight. Everyone's talking about tonight. I don't want to talk about tonight, but everyone else is. So I'll read your comments. Big hello to Stan. Hope you're well, my friend. Good to see you. Lid says Tottenham thought they would be kingmakers. Their contribution will be losing to all three title contenders, I guess, just like Sheffield United. Afsar's predicting Spurs 0, Manchester City 9. Damien says it will be a disgrace if Tottenham don't come out and have a go. And Panasonic, says I'll fall into a depression if Spurs. Yeah, I can't say that, but yeah, you know what I mean. Luke says top man Harry for condoning those beautiful fireworks. Okay, look, let's get into what we're actually here to talk about. And we're going to talk about Pep Guardiola's comments, some comments he's made in the lead up to this Tottenham Hotspur game that I think have rattled a few people. I wouldn't go as far as saying I'm rattled, but I definitely think this is worth a conversation and a discussion. So what has Pep said and what do I think about it? Okay, so Pep Guardiola was talking about the Premier League with some reporters ahead of this game against Spurs. And he said, it's boring. It's not. Basically, in response to sort of a line of questioning that suggested that the Premier League has become boring, in that Manchester City just win it every year and they're favourites to do so again. And they probably will go on and achieve that by the end of the week. So he was kind of responding to that kind of suggestion, that kind of conversation. And he said before it was about money. If that's the reason, then Manchester United should have won all the titles. Secondly, Chelsea. And third, Arsenal. They've spent much more in the last 5 or 6 years than us net spend. Okay, so to kind of put that into layman's terms, because obviously English isn't Pep's first language, right? So you understand what he's saying, you can get the gist of what he's saying. But when you are, when you are reading it as quotes like that, it might not always come out in the way that you want it to. I think what I'll do is I'll play it. I think I can do that. Hold on, here we go. You should be able to hear this. Just a second. Have a listen to what Pep had to say.
It's boring. It's not. It's so difficult. Because before, it was the money. It was the reason why Man United should have won all the titles. All of them. And the second, Chelsea. All the titles. And third, Arsenal. All the titles. They spend much money in the last 5-6 years than us spend that. They should be there. They are not there. It's boring.
So what he's saying is that you can keep talking about the money. I hope you guys could hear that, by the way. Let me know if you couldn't, because then there's a big blank patch in the podcast that I'll need to edit out after. But basically what he was saying is that if you're going by money, if people are saying that it's only about money, and the reason that Manchester City are where they are today is purely because of money, then why aren't Manchester United there? Why aren't Chelsea there? And then he mentions third, Arsenal. Well, guess what, Pep? We are there. And you're going to have to win this thing on the final day. So this idea of putting Arsenal into the same group of clubs as Chelsea and Manchester United, I'm not having that, first of all. Look, I think he's got a valid point when it comes to United, who have spent a lot of money, not just under Erik ten Hag, but prior to his arrival as well, and have had very little success. As a result of that. I know they've won a few cups along the way, but in terms of, being competitive right at the top end of the table, they had a couple of second place finishes when they were nowhere near the leaders, really and truly. So that's a little bit of a red herring. But United, for what they've spent on individual players and as a whole, should not be sitting in 8th place right now a whopping 14 points behind Aston Villa in fourth. That is not acceptable. So I understand why he brings up Manchester United. I also understand why he brings up Chelsea, because Chelsea spent £1 billion. Now, most people looked at that Chelsea side and went, yeah, you know what? They spent £1 billion, but they spent it on young players and they're trying to rebuild a totally new squad. So actually to expect them to be competitive straight away, despite that spend, maybe was a little bit naive. But again, if he's talking about money spent, Man United and Chelsea should be competitive. And the truth is, they are not. Arsenal are, though. So why bring up Arsenal? Talking about net spend is fine if you're talking about the last 5 or 6 years. Manchester City have been able to sell a number of players to make their books look a lot healthier. They were able to get 50 million out of us for Gabriel Jesus. They got about 35, I think, for Alexander Zinchenko. They've sold Cole Palmer and they moved on a number of other players as well. So they've managed to generate some funds, which is good, of course. And he's right to point out that the net spend in that period of time that he's referring to isn't that big from Manchester City, obviously because they've sold well, as I mentioned there. But to completely ignore the fact that Manchester City had been spending tons prior to his arrival, and in particular when he first came in, where he went through how many goalkeepers, how many fullbacks, to get the side to a place where he could take it on and make it the formidable machine that it is today. I'm not seeking to discredit Pep Guardiola. I think there's an argument. I mean, he's not my number one, but I think there's an argument that Pep Guardiola is the greatest coach of all time. So I'm not sitting here trying to discredit him or suggesting that he's not a good manager or that it's purely down to money. But when someone as intelligent as Pep Guardiola, when someone as well respected as Pep Guardiola sits down and makes a point like that, completely dismissing the fact that he was just given a blank check when he walked in at the football club and was allowed to bring in players for big money and change his mind on them, in some cases 3 to 6 months in, and then get new ones and new ones after that until they got it right. For him to completely dismiss that, I think is just, I just think it's so disingenuous of him. And that's the kind of thing that, people watching on will have probably taken issue with. Yeah, point the finger at United. Ask United fans, they'll tell you the same thing. They'll tell you that we spent a load of money and we're not competitive and it's not good enough. Ask Chelsea fans how they feel about this season. Okay, it's probably going to end in a slightly more positive way than it looked like they were going to kind of experience maybe 3 months ago. They might sneak into the top 6 or something. They might sneak into the European positions. And then people will say they've salvaged their season somehow. Fine. But look at what they spent. So the point about those two is valid. Why are you bringing Arsenal into the equation? Why are you bringing Arsenal into the equation, Pep? Mikel Arteta is so many years behind you in terms of his project in comparison to yours. Yet he ran you close last season and he's taken you right down to the wire this time. And you can talk about what Arsenal have spent over the last few years, but it still does not amount to the amount of money that you have spent since taking over at Manchester City. The other thing as well to add to that is Manchester City's wage bill is astronomical. It really, really is. And again, that is massive, right? You can talk loads about net spend. I always say this, when it comes to the summer and people are, talking about what needs to happen at their football club and they're identifying players that maybe they want to see moved on and they go, well, he should probably go. I won't sell him, though, for anything less than £20 million. And then someone offers £15 million and they go, nah, I want 20. That's what I'm after. I'm not going to accept anything less than that. The bit that I think people always forget and that people fail to account for is actually the wages part. And the fact that you can get someone off of your wage bill and that can give you so much wiggle room. And the transfer fee in a lot of these situations and in a lot of these circumstances becomes secondary. So let's not focus on the net spend thing. Let's focus on the fact that you were brought in, 7 years ago? 6 years ago, 7 years ago? You were brought in all that time ago. You were allowed to do whatever you wanted from the very beginning. And you're still not exactly sort of in a position to play the kind of poverty card when it comes to your resources. And in the summer, yeah, it's it isn't a line that went down particularly well with me, and I'd like to get you guys' thoughts in the comments section as well. There's loads of you commenting on this. What else have we got? We've got a Manchester City fan who's here to leap to Pep Guardiola's defense. Look at the net spend from 2015, 1 year before Pep. Don't come at me with the net spend stuff. Don't come at me with the net spend stuff. He came in, he had Joe Hart. He didn't want Joe Hart. He brought in Claudio Bravo. Then he moved on to Edison. Okay, so he's been able to maneuver things in the way that he wants, and wasn't doing it. He wasn't coming into a club where he had Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, Mesut Ozil bleeding the club dry in terms of wages, and having to manage disciplinary issues with them. To compare the journey that Arteta's had to go through to Pep Guardiola's to get Arsenal to a stage where they're competitive is just so wide of the mark. It's unbelievable. It really, really is. See, I think stuff like this is harsh. Martin says he's the greatest checkbook manager of all time. As I say, I still think there's a case for him to be the greatest Premier League or the greatest manager of all time, full stop. Personally, I don't put him at number one. I've got someone else at number one. Maybe we'll do a video on that over the summer. But, there's a case for him. And so I'm not going to sit here and discredit him. I just don't like the way he's sort of pretending that what Manchester City have achieved and probably will go on to achieve next weekend is not in part because of the fact that they have had greater resources than people. Big shout out to Tom of the Gooner Talk. Make sure you click on Tom's name in the chat. Go and subscribe to his channel. I'm sure most of you are already subscribed, but he does a brilliant show every single day. You won't want to miss it. And myself and Tom and Dan Potts are jumping on to the Highbury squad at 6 p.m. So really looking forward to that. Make sure you come over and join us. Make sure you subscribe to Dan and make sure you subscribe to Sophie as well over on the Highbury squad. Des says, yep, mind games. What else have you got? Jean Rene says net spend says more about how well you sell than it says about how much you spend. Yep, agree with that. What else have we got? Zamoud says they spent 45 million on Calvin Phillips and didn't need him. Exactly. Seeger says you're missing the point he made, mate. He was referring to people saying the league is boring, and he pointed out how difficult it is because of everyone spending. The league is boring. The league is boring. There's no I don't understand why people don't want to acknowledge that or accept that. It's okay to say that the Premier League has become a little bit boring. In terms of individual matches and in terms of entertainment, it's still up there with the very, very best. But the fact that we go into every season, certainly in recent times, if you go back over the last 4 or 5 years, it's always been, let's say last 5 years, either Liverpool or Man City are going to win the league. No one else is going to come close. Liverpool managed to topple Manchester City once in that time during the COVID season. And every other year, Manchester City won it. They won the treble last year, and they're probably going to win the Premier League and the FA Cup this year. It has become boring. And you look at the bottom of the table, and people always talk about the difference between the Premier League and the Championship and the sort of gap between those two getting greater and greater every year. Is there a better indicator of that than the fact that all three clubs that came up are going straight back down? I think, look, personally, I like the PSR rules. A lot of people don't. A lot of people think it puts too many restrictions on football clubs. A lot of people think that it's going to deter big investors from coming over and taking over Premier League clubs. I like it because I like the idea. Maybe I'm old school, maybe I'm old fashioned, and maybe I don't live in the real world when I kind of think this and say this, but I like the idea of good coaching being a difference maker. I like the idea of spending wisely, putting you at an advantage. I also understand that there are some clubs that are bigger than others that generate more revenue. And so you're never going to get everybody on a level playing field. But those things, good coaching, good recruitment, they have to be worth something in this game. And that's where I'm at. The Gooner Talk, Tom points out, Pep inherited De Bruyne, Silva, Aguero, Toure, Otamendi, Sterling, Kolarov, company. I could go on. You're absolutely right. You are absolutely right. Mikel Arteta inherited Socrates, Mustafi, Callum Chambers, Rob Holding, Ainsley Maitland-Niles. Like, we were nowhere near the level that City were at the point when both of those managers took over. Pep Guardiola had a huge advantage in that he had a great squad to start off with. He had the foundations, and then he was allowed to go crazy in the transfer market and do all the things he wanted to do as well. And that's why he is where he is. This one. Pep inherited the 19th oldest squad at that time of the Premier League. Doesn't mean it was bad. It doesn't mean it was bad, does it? It doesn't mean it was bad. Okay, what else have we got? Marco says, much better hat selection today, man. I was wearing an Inter hat the other day, and Marco is a huge Juventus fan and was not happy. Andrew says, respect to Pep. He's a proper manager, not a novice coach like Arteta. Big difference between a coach and a manager. Listen, I'm not trying to disrespect Pep's achievements. I've said that about 7 times on this episode so far. I don't need to keep saying it. But if he is a proper manager, as you say, and Pep Guardiola is having to, take the title race to the final day against a novice coach, then, what does that say about the state of affairs at the moment? I think it's so harsh what people still want to criticize Arteta. It's mad. It is absolutely wild to me. Okay, we're going to take a short pause. And when we come back, we're going to talk about that supercomputer thing that everybody loves so much. What's it saying about our title chances ahead of Tottenham's game against Manchester City tonight? We'll get into that in just a minute. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Welcome back to the pod. Hope you're all good. Hope you're all well. Thank you for being with me. If I could just ask, if you haven't done so already, please leave a like on the video. It really, really does help. And I can see there are loads of you watching along with us at the moment. In terms of likes, I don't think we're anywhere near where we should be. So if we can try get, 200 likes on the board by the time the stream ends, I'd be absolutely delighted and chuffed with that. It really, really does help. And as I keep saying, since going out alone on the pod, the things that you can help me with and support me with are the likes, are being subscribed, the downloads, the reviews that you leave, in particular on the audio platforms. All of that stuff really, really does help me a ton. So if you could do that, I'd be very, very grateful. If you want to go one further and support by becoming a patron, you can. There is a link in the description. As I said, over the summer, all of our Patreon content is going to be free and open and unlocked. So you can go over to that link now and sign up for free. See how you like it over the course of the summer. And it's a bit of a kind of try before you buy. And if you do like it and you feel like it's worthwhile in terms of supporting the podcast, then you can do that. If you don't want to, no problem whatsoever. I understand it is a difficult time for people. Okay, let's get into the supercomputer then. What is it saying? How do Arsenal's title chances look going into tonight's game against, or I say against because it feels like we're playing, we're not. Tonight's game between Tottenham and Manchester City, and of course the weekend. We are guaranteed to have it go down to the final day, regardless of what happens at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium tonight. But in terms of the chances of winning the Premier League for Arsenal and Manchester City, based on the result of tonight's game, this is what the Opta supercomputer is telling us. If Tottenham Hotspur win tonight against Manchester City, according to this, Arsenal have an 81% chance of winning the Premier League. Manchester City's chances would go down to 19%. If there is a draw tonight between Manchester City and Tottenham, this says that Arsenal's chances of winning the Premier League this weekend would go up to 75%. So only 6% difference between Manchester City losing or drawing the game tonight. And if Manchester City win, according to this, their chances of winning the thing go right up to 84%, and Arsenal's chances go down to 16%. So if that doesn't tell you how important tonight's game is in terms of the outcome of this Premier League title race, then I don't know what will. So yeah, let me know your thoughts on that. I kind of agree with those numbers. I don't look at those numbers and think anything's off. I think it all makes a lot of sense. I think that, you know, any positive result for Tottenham tonight is huge for us. But as I said earlier in the show, we're not going to spend loads of time talking about that particular game because, yeah, a lot of you are going to take this in after the game's taken place. And we know that Manchester City are going to win 3-0. So let's just go on the premise that our chances of winning the Premier League title on Sunday are at 16%. 16% is better than 0% is what I will say on that. Let's get some of your thoughts from the live chat. What are you guys saying? Big thanks as well to Sarosh, who is a Man City fan but loves the content. Thank you, mate. Appreciate your kind words and thank you for joining us. Amesy says Arteta has already demonstrated that he's a talented coach and he hasn't reached his ceiling yet. Just going back to those points earlier on. If there are general points, I'll come to them in a minute. I just want to focus on these predictions that have come out. There is lots of stuff coming through regarding the supercomputer. Big GZ says, who's the supercomputer supporting? Well, look, of the three possible outcomes of tonight's game, I know one outcome, a Manchester City win, is the most likely, but two of them would do us a massive favor. So it's kind of 2 out of 3 chance, maybe, if you want to look at it through that lens. Oh, why am I allowing myself to get sucked into this shit again? Okay, what else have we got? Andrew says, let's take the draw. I ain't cheering on Spurs no matter what. I mean, I'm not subscribing to all this, like, oh, you know, come on, we're Spurs for the day and all that nonsense. Like, I'm not having that. Like, you're not going to catch me doing that or saying that. If they get a result, that might change in my head at about 10 o'clock tonight. You might see me post something positive about Spurs. I will certainly wind up Spurs fans, friends of mine that I know are desperate to see their team lose tonight, regardless of what it means for their Champions League hopes. But this, like, people changing their profile pictures to Tottenham stuff and all that, I can't do that. And I never will. I never will. Pride has to count for something, right? Aaron says, just with regards to well, it's a kind of 2 out of 3 chance. That's definitely not how it works. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And Elia says, I'm 100% or 1,000%, 100,000%, I think that is, supporting Spurs. Yeah, look, we all want Spurs to get a result tonight, but to sit there and go, come on, you Spurs, and all of that, no, you can't be doing that. Can't be doing that. Okay, another short pause. When we come back, it's a very short pause, so don't go anywhere. We're going to get into some of your Patreon questions that I've been collecting over the last few days. Welcome back to the pod. Remember, leave a like on the video if you haven't done so already. Subscribe to the channel if you're brand spanking new. We've got 120 likes at the moment, but there's nearly 400 of you watching. So let's get it up to 200 likes at the absolute minimum. Come on, get involved. It really, really does help. Okay, so let's attack some of these Patreon questions, which are brilliant, and I really do want to get into. Some of them were sent in a few days ago, so I beg your pardon because there's a couple that are out of date now, and that is my fault, not your fault. I'll always make sure that I try and stay on top of them a lot more and a lot better going forward. This is a question from SJ Cliff, who says, if Kai, talking about Kai Havertz, missed that first penalty versus Bournemouth, could things have gone differently, or would his talent have always shone through? It's an interesting one because I want to sit here and say, no, Kai Havertz was always going to hit the ground running eventually, and he was always going to take off as an Arsenal player, and he was always going to, make it work, and we were always going to be sitting here at the end of the season talking about how positive a signing he's been. But the truth is, I can't say that with any real degree of honesty. I was worried at that point. When Kai Havertz stepped up to take that penalty, I thought it was a pity penalty. I thought that the players had given that to him because they were starting to look at him and think, it's not really going your way, is it? And although you can package that up as being a really nice thing and a sign of unity and all of that, which it is to a degree, it does kind of indicate that even the players on the pitch were starting to wonder whether Kai Havertz was always going to come good. And I remember being at this game at Bournemouth and interviewing Mikel Arteta after the game for the radio and saying, Mikel, was that something that you had asked the players to do? Or was that something that they decided to do, given, you know, how they've seen sort of Kai Havertz's Arsenal career start? And he insisted that it was the players and it was their decision and it was their idea. And so, look, do I think that eventually he would have come good? I think eventually he would have got better. But I do think that was a real lift-off point in his Arsenal career. And I think with someone like him, where his body language can come across as a little bit casual at times, where when he's low on confidence, I think everyone can see it. I think he needed that moment. And the longer it took for that moment to come, the tougher it would have been for him to rediscover some of the form that we saw early in his career when he was at Bayer Leverkusen. So I think that moment was key for Kai Havertz. And in truth, he's never really looked back since then. I think in the first half of the season, he played as a midfield player, which didn't really work for us and didn't really work for him either. And I don't think that Mikel Arteta was planning to do that when we went in the season, if I'm being honest. I know a lot of people said he was being signed as a left eight. Obviously, Partey being unavailable made Mikel have to look elsewhere for an option in midfield. And I think as we sort of got into the season and things started to kick off, I think he started to look at people like Fabio Vieira, for example, and thought, yeah, you know what, technically, in terms of what you can do on the ball, you've got all of the ability that we need in terms of creativity and all of that stuff. But physically, you're just not there. And to expect Declan Rice to sit in that midfield with Odegaard and Fabio Vieira, or Odegaard and Emile Smith-Rowe, or Odegaard and Leandro Trossard, which is what we saw on a couple of occasions early in the season, that just was never going to work. And I think the physical side of Kai Havertz's game actually got him in the team even when he wasn't performing due to a lack of alternatives. And he's come through all of that and he's got to a place now where he's contributing, but he's contributing as a centre forward. So to answer your question, I know I've spent a while on this, SJ, but I think it was a really good question. I think that moment was huge. And I think that moment would have eventually come at some point, but obviously the earlier, the better. You could still argue that it came too late. But that moment coming along was big for Kai Havertz. And I think we're in a much better position with him as a result of that. Really, really good question. Thank you for that one. We're going to tackle the next one in just a second. Thank you very much for that question. Remember, you can sign up as a patron for free, being the key point, via the link below, and you can get your questions and stuff across as well. Lots of people in the live chat. Lee Gunner is here as well. Lee, hello. We've got Tom. We've got I'm a Real Gooner. We've got BX Gunner 81. We've got Rational Cat Fat. Yeah, loads of you in the chat, which is great to see. Help me get those likes up, please. It really, really does help. Thank you very, very much. Okay, is Jarell Hato joining us a possibility? That's a question from Sammy. I mean, he recently signed a new contract with Ajax, and I think a lot of people, when they read that news, went, oh, well, that's going to be the end of Arsenal's interest. Often we see players sign contracts at football clubs because the football club is wanting to protect itself first and foremost. And I think that's what Ajax are doing here. Ajax are a football club that know that when the big European giants come calling, of which they were once upon a time, they have to sell. That's the way they operate. That's the Ajax model. It's, bring up young talent, develop them, get them into a place where they're ready, let them go, let them spread their wings and fly away, and you count your money at the end of it. That's what happens. So Jarell Hato is someone that Arsenal do like, is someone that has the right profile, I think, and has a high ceiling. a lot of people I've spoken to in the past have said not just because of his looks, but that he reminds them quite a bit of Jurrien Timber. And when you think about how much he's played, Jarell Hato at 17 years old, starting from 17 years old, that's incredible. So, he's obviously one with a big future ahead of him. Would I rule out Arsenal signing him because he signed a new contract with Ajax? No, I just think that Arsenal are going to have to pay for him, which is often the case when you're talking about some of European football's hottest properties. Really good question. Thank you. Let's take this one from Vernon, another one of our patrons, who said, what's your opinion on the situation at Everton with the 777 group, I should say, and Moshiri? It appears, given that he was involved with Usmanov, that we dodged a bullet by KSE winning the ownership battle. It's a hard one, isn't it? Because I'm going to hold my hands up, right? I'm not going to sit here and lie and pretend that my opinion was something else. At the time when we were going through that ownership battle, when we were experiencing that, when that was happening right at the top of the football club, I was very much team Usmanov, because I felt that Usmanov was going to make the cash injection that Arsenal really needed at the time. We'd fallen away from the top of the league. We were having to sell all of our best players all of the time. People that I grew up adoring, like Robin van Persie, were turning around and saying, this club is not going in the right direction. I want to leave, and joining our biggest rivals in Manchester United. I found that period really, really difficult. And if you'd have asked me back then, I'm not going to be revisionist. If you'd have asked me back then, I would have said Usmanov over KSE. And even when KSE first took full control of the club, I still wasn't convinced. And then the Super League thing happened, and I was even less convinced about them. And it's taken them a long time to prove to me and to prove to a lot of other Arsenal fans that they do have the right intentions. And so I look back now and I think, yeah, we did dodge a bullet with the whole Usmanov thing. And this whole thing with the 777 group and Everton, I feel sorry for the Evertonians. I really, really do. Because as much as we've got rivalries and, we have our history with certain football clubs, we're all football fans and we all love our football clubs. And when a football club is being dragged down the toilet by irresponsible ownership and bad decisions being made at the top by people who just do not care for those football clubs as much as they should, you end up in a situation where, you start to feel a bit of sympathy for those fans. 777 have run a number of football clubs in world football into the ground. They are one of those groups that has multiple ownerships, and nobody you speak to that has them involved at their football club likes them. Nobody, not a single one. So that's a red flag in itself. Someone from the Premier League was speaking a little bit earlier on today, and forgive me because his name has completely gone out of my mind at this moment in time. But he said that, look, the Premier League are there because people are saying, well, why aren't the Premier League stopping this? What's the point in this proper owners test and all the rest, whatever it's called? What's the point in that if someone like 777 can get their hands on Everton, run up a load of debt and put the club in danger? And what he was saying was, look, the test is there to prevent bad people getting in and to provide some kind of security for those football clubs in terms of the initial checks done. But he said, I can't control who the owner of Everton Football Club wants to sell his business to. It is a business at the end of the day. And that was a really, really valid point. But you can understand why the Everton fans are feeling the way they are, why they're stressed about the situation, why they're protesting. And to answer your question, Vernon, yeah, I look back at the time where we were in this situation where it was Usmanov or KSE, and I do think we've bloody dodged a bullet. We really, really have. I'm going to quickly take this one from Clayton Usher. Get a couple for me in the comments as well, in the live chat, and I'll pick up a couple from there as well. Just going to take this one from Clayton Usher, who says, is there more that can be done to improve the attitude and the cohesion on and off the pitch in this Arsenal team, or is it simply a matter of sustaining things for the years to come? I think I think the next stage is winning. Like, you've got the camaraderie there, you've got the togetherness, you've got the unity. I think that's clear for everybody to see. I really, really do. I think everyone can see that the spirit at Arsenal Football Club is much better. And this are some of the things that we do borderline cringy. Yes, they are. but they do work. So you kind of got to give the club and Arteta and everybody involved in that stuff the benefit of the doubt, okay? But how do you improve that further? I think the only way that you improve that now is by going on and actually winning things and securing titles, because if you do that, then that builds a bond for life between players, you know, and when you're in the trenches and when you're struggling in a game of football and your backs are up against the wall, you can pull on those previous experiences. You can remember and think about how joyous those moments were, and that can spur you on to go and make sure that you have more and more of those moments. And that's what finishes off a team, in my opinion. Silverware, trophies. You don't want to be the bridesmaids all the time. You need to be the bride at some point as well, or you should want to be the bride. I guess everyone grows up wanting to be a bride, right? Like rather than a bridesmaid. Being a bridesmaid or a groomsman is cool too, but you want to be a bride or groom at some point as well. And that's the next step for Arsenal. And only when that happens do I think that you can look at the team and say, well, it's complete now. And its cycle is going to last for however many years off the back of that. But another really, really good question. Thank you for that one. Okay, I'm going to take a couple of your questions from the live chat. What have we got? Lots of you saying smash the likes up. Thank you. Thank you to Lee. Thank you to Wandering Minstrel. Ivan, I said I wasn't going to talk about this game on today's show much. I know I've mentioned it on multiple occasions, but will Ange actually make a tactical change today? I look, they play in one way. They like to attack. They like to play front-footed football. I don't want Tottenham to turn up tonight and just literally sit back, because I don't think they're set up to do that. I don't think they're well equipped to do that. But I would like to see a bit more balance to their game, i.e. maybe drop the high line back 10, 15 yards. Maybe don't commit as many bodies forward on the counter-attack. Maybe protect yourselves against set pieces a little bit better. Hopefully they've worked on that, because we saw a few weeks ago at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium when we went there that they're bloody not very good at that side of the game. I just want to see a balanced performance from Tottenham, and whatever happens, happens. It's out of our control. There's no point in obsessing over it. We'll see where we get to. Question from Lee, who says, when is it acceptable for you to think this manager and or the hierarchy ain't it? How many more years, etc., with no trophies? It's a really good question. It is a really good question, because I think the problem we have is, ever since Arteta came in, he's split opinion. He's divided opinion. And over the course of the last, I want to say 2.5 years, I think the opinion has started to sway towards the more positive side about Arteta than the negative side of Arteta. So I think the majority of us now believe that Mikel Arteta is doing a good job and that we're on the right track and that we're on the right path. But it's impossible to deny that there were points earlier on in his tenure where people had every right to criticize him. But I think because we're getting better every year, it's very difficult to sit here and say, well, if he doesn't win the Premier League this season, then he's got to go. I think when you get to the point that you don't think you're improving anymore, or at the very least maintaining, then you need to start looking at, where we go from here. I think the recruitment it has been really, really good over the last few years, generally speaking. And there have been some misses along the way as well. Every club has had them. Someone pointed out earlier that Manchester City, who, despite their riches, are often referred to as the best run club in the Premier League because of, how many of their signings they get right, and the fact that they seem to sell people at the right time, etc. They signed Calvin Phillips for a ton of money in the summer, and that didn't work out. And they've signed how many fullbacks in the past that didn't work out, and goalkeepers and all the rest of it. So everybody has misses. But generally speaking, I think we've been signing players over the last 3 years now that year on year have made us a better team. And I know it was difficult to see earlier this season whether those signings had made us a better team. And around about Christmas, a lot of us were going, have we actually improved, or have we tried to overcomplicate it? Well, the fact that regardless of what happens tonight, this title race is going to the final day is a step forward from last season. Now, it might not be a big enough step in a lot of people's minds. And if that's your opinion, fine. But it's still progress. It's still moving forward. We've taken it to the final day, and we've done it whilst being in the Champions League as well. I'm not saying that there's never going to be a point where you can question Mikel Arteta or you can ask questions of those above him. But as long as we're getting better, I think you need to give him the benefit of the doubt. And that's where I am at today. We got better last season from the season prior. We're better this season from the season before. And so while we're on that upward trajectory, I think you've got to stick with him. And we'll see where we end up. I also don't think you can always quantify progress or judge progress solely based on trophies. I know trophies are the name of the game and trophies are what you want and all the rest of it. But it's not the only thing that you can judge progress by, because if it was, then people would look at Jurgen Klopp and and I know he won other cups and stuff in the European Cup and all that, which is great. But he only won the Premier League once against this Man City side. And when you think about how good that Liverpool team was, it just goes to highlight that it's not easy to get over the line when it comes to the Premier League title race with Manchester City in your way. So the answer to that question, I've gone around the houses a lot, is as long as I'm seeing progress, I'm content. There will come a time where that progress needs to be capped off with silverware, but I'm not there now. So like, I'm not going to sit here if we don't win the Premier League and say he's got to go. And I'm actually going to go into the summer excited about how we can figure out, you know, how we can take this team forward again and come back next year, hopefully stronger. But yeah. Okay, going to leave it there. Thank you all so much for joining me. Really, really do appreciate it. Make sure you leave a like on the video if you haven't done so already. Subscribe to the channel if you're brand spanking new as well. It really, really does help. If you're listening on audio, please do leave us a review. Remember, you can sign up on Patreon for free. So get into the link below and sign up, join up, support me if you'd like to. And yeah, I'll catch you all very soon. Come over to the Highbury squad. I'm going to be joining Sophie, Dan, and Tom on there in around about 10 minutes time. Yeah, then I'm going to go into hibernation and hide because I do not want to sit and watch Tottenham get absolutely pummeled by Manchester City on their own patch while their fans in the stands are laughing about it. I'll catch you all soon. Until the next one, take care of yourselves. Have a great day, great evening. Goodbye. And I nearly said up the Spurs. I can't do it. It just doesn't come out. See you later.